Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here, 5 Reasons Sports contributor, co host of Scouting the Fins. And with all the talk around a possible Jonnu Smith trade, there's been talk of what the tight end room could look like without Jonnu. And I'm not necessarily going to get into that as a whole, but another thing that has resurfaced is a narrative around the high volume of penalties by Julian Hill. And a big part of that has been due to a tweet that came out showing the players with the most penalties over the past 2 seasons, with Julian Hill making an appearance with 14 of his own. Julian Hill is a second year undrafted free agent, or was in 2024, going into his third season now. And he was probably given that role of the number one Y tight end a little earlier than he should have been in his second season. But it's not like, Durham Smythe was not making a strong case to move Julian Hill to the bench. Julian Hill also does not play the same position as Jonnu Smith, even though they're both listed as tight ends. Julian Hill is much more your inline Y tight end, and Jonnu is more of your move F type tight end. And I'm not saying not to be frustrated or mad, what the tight end room would look like, but I want you to be mad for the right reasons, right? Be mad about Jonnu's lack of, or not Jonnu, Julian Hill's lack of production in the receiving game. Be mad about his lack of execution in the run game. But that's something that felt like improved as the season progressed, along with the penalty issue. But don't be mad about the penalties. He did have 14 over the past 2 seasons, which was 5 in 2023 and 9 in 2024. And he really got the ball rolling for that with a couple of false start penalties in weeks 1 and 2. But his only game with multiple penalties was week 3 versus Seattle. I think that it's worth mentioning that that was the first game that Tua was out and you had Skylar Thompson trying to figure things out. And so we're going to go through all 9 of his penalties in 2024. And I'm not looking to come up with an excuse for every penalty. We're not going to discuss them all, in depth the same way, but we are going to discuss the ones that I feel like should be analyzed a little more. That covers it a little more than just a tweet showing the number of penalties. And you're going to see that, some of the penalties were indeed legit, but some of them were kind of iffy and some of them were just flat out bogus. And if you take out a couple of those penalties, then suddenly he's not even on that list. And we're probably not talking about this nearly as much being an issue as what we did end up talking about it in 2024 and kind of resurfacing here for 2025. All right, so first one we're going to look at here. So this is going to be week 1 against the Jaguars. This is fourth quarter with 8:55 left to go in the game. And this is going to be a false start on Julian Hill. And we see him up here at the top of the screen. No excuse here, right? Just a simple false start. Maybe gets baited a little bit by the defender shifting a little bit, but not going to sit here and make any excuses for Julian Hill on this one. Next one here is going to be week 2 against Buffalo. This is in the first quarter. 7 minutes, 56 seconds left to go in the quarter. 1st and 10 situation. Going to be another false start here. And you can see there, um, you know, not nearly as bad as the last one, but he is, leaving early right there. You can see that little bit, right? So it's split second, right? But he did leave early. Next one here is going to be the first one in that, pretty awful Seattle game where he had 4 penalties. This one's going to be first quarter, 6:38 to go, 1st and 10. And we're going to get a holding penalty on this one. And this is Julian Hill down here on the bottom of your screen, right? And as we look at that, right, you can kind of see that he gets wrapped up. And again, this is one that I, not going to give Julian Hill on the left side of your screen now an excuse on. But what I would say is that he's in okay position, right? This is counter solid, so he is comboing down with Teron Armstead, working up to, um, you know, future Dolphin Tyrell Dodson here. And as he gets off that block, right, he's in really good position here. Uh, just has to learn to reset his hands. Right, instead his hands stay high, ends up wrapping him up and getting him around the neck. So this is one that, again, this is a penalty. I'm not going to say it's not, but big picture, we're talking about second year UDFA, still relatively new to the tight end position. This is one that I think you can easily get better with. I think this is one that, John Embry talking about being a little too aggressive, on the blocks. I think this one just settle down a little bit, reset the hands, and you'd be fine on this one. All right, moving ahead here. So this is going to be still in the Seattle game. So this is going to be quarter one still. 2 minutes, 21 seconds to go. And we're going to get a illegal form or illegal motion penalty on Julian Hill, who's down here at the bottom of his screen. And this one kind of frustrates me because obviously it's a Skylar Thompson game, right? But you can see that Julian Hill looks out there and, first he's saying something to Tyreek Hill, right? Then he's looking back in, talking to Skylar Thompson, who is looking at the sideline, oblivious to what's going on over here, right? Julian Hill realizes he's not getting help from Skylar Thompson, right? Then you can see him motioning to Tyreek Hill to move back, right? And then, pointing forward. He's obviously concerned about the formation, realizes something is off, right? Tyreek is just kind of standing out here nonchalantly, right? So eventually Julian Hill's like, screw this, I got to fix it, right? And he moves back, ball snapped, and you end up with the penalty, right? But this is just one that, this shouldn't be, I don't want to keep harping on it, right? But second year UDFA tight end is the one who's out here trying to fix the formation. When you've got Tyreek Hill that you're paying all this money and knows that he can't cover up somebody on the inside, you have a quarterback who's been in the system, should be able to at least get a damn formation right. But here it is, your tight end is trying to fix stuff as the ball snapped, and you get an uh, illegal motion penalty on you because he's trying to move back and fix the issues. All right, next one here is going to be your third penalty in the Seattle game. This is second quarter, 2:56 to go. Fourth and 19. Julian Hill is your right guard on your punt team here. And so by rule, right, the helmet of the players, the linemen, whatever, that are not the center, they have to break the belt of the center. And, obviously that's a very arbitrary term, but you can see that Julian Hill is, right on the line there. And if this was, a unique scenario where for whatever reason he took a, half yard back stance, then, I'd hear the argument more. But if you go back and look at the previous reps for the punt team in the first 2 weeks, which I did, you're going to see that Julian Hill had a very similar position and stance to what he did in this one. So this was not him changing anything. It was just a decision by the officials. Probably had the Seahawks coach in his ear chirping about it. Decision to make the call there. And you can see, right, coach down there is pointing at it. But what I will say about this is that, you know, even though it's very minor, it's something that should have been picked up by the Dolphins coaching staff. And if you go to the following week and the rest of um, the rest of the punts for the season, I think you're going to find that Julian Hill was bumped out here to the right tackle spot instead of the right guard spot. And you can see that his stance is exactly the same. He's still just a little bit further back than the guy beside him. You know, helmet might even be further back in this one. And he doesn't get called for this for the rest of the year. So I know we like to rag on Danny Crossman, but this is one of those deals that, as a special teams coordinator, this is the type of stuff that you should be picking up on. And if you have a guy that, likes to be just a little bit further back in his stance for whatever reason, You're better off putting him more towards the outside of the formation where he's not as, it's not as obvious for the side judge to see that he is further back in his stance. And then last one here for the Seahawks game. This is going to be a holding penalty on Julian Hill. He's coming across in motion. This is going to be in quarter three, 6:32 to go. Um, and as you watch there, right, there's a bit of a combo, and you can see that, on the surface, right, he's hooking that left shoulder of the defender, and you can see why that is called. But we're going to flip to the end zone angle to demonstrate my issue with this one. So this is a outside zone to the right. And you can see that, as Achan's getting the ball, right, he should be reading this defender. So if you're reading this defender, does the blocker have outside leverage or inside leverage? I think it's pretty easy to see that he has inside leverage. That ball should be going right there. Right? And it probably could have still gone there, right? Maybe wouldn't have been a huge gain, but this was looks like a 1st and 10 play. You don't need to bounce this and go for a home run. The bigger issue here is that we have Liam Eichenberg facing a 2-eye defensive tackle, and that should easily be a seal block here, right? And Eichenberg gets into okay position to start, but then you can see that he kind of gets walked back into the hole. So from Julian Hill's perspective, right, he's comboing off this block. He knows that relationship that Austin Jackson has, and he should probably feel like there is no reason this ball should be going to the outside, right? So his idea here is just to keep the defender to the outside. And we're going to see one later that kind of shows that everybody holds in the NFL. And you can kind of see, you even got Aaron Brewer there holding. And then, to top it off, number 50 here as he's sliding over. And this is going to be kind of tough to see, right? But I think his right foot there, basically trips over Julian Hill is what I'm trying to get at. His foot hits Julian Hill's leg, and that's what makes Julian Hill fall. I think that, had Julian Hill been able to stay on his feet, then we probably don't have a holding penalty there. So this one I felt like was, on the surface, yes, it's a holding penalty, but I think, if you go deeper into that, you can kind of understand why it was a holding penalty, and realize that, if players other than Julian Hill fix what they're doing, then we never get to this point here. And then our next play is actually going to be the other holding penalty. This is going to be against the Patriots, and this is going to be week 5, 4th quarter, 8:20 to go. Situation is 2nd and 7. And this is going to be Julian Hill as your tight end here. And this is another counter type play. And we're going to take a look at the end zone angle here as well. So you're going to get Teron Armstead and Julian Hill comboing through number 92 up to number 50 there. And this hold was unnecessary, right? And you kind of get why it was called, right? You get the hands outside of the frame. But one, it was unnecessary. Julian Hill did not have to hold in that scenario. But, more than that, you've got, like I said, holding on every play. Teron Armstead has that left shoulder hooked big time. As Teron's going to the ground, he is dragging that defender to the ground. You have Alec Ingold coming through the hole on number 15, right? Got him hooked under the arm, outside the arm over there, and is holding him 15 yards downfield, right? And then you see this flag way out here. It could have very easily been Ingold that he saw, but called it on Julian Hill, right? So, when you look at 3 holds right at the point of attack. Again, holding every play. I don't think that this one should have been called. Um, and if it was, I felt like it probably should have been on Ingold more than Hill in that situation. All right, this one we got it's a false start on Julian Hill. And the situation here is going to be second quarter, 4th and 5. And as we said, Julian Hill is now the offensive tackle position on the punt team. And he is called for a false start here. I want you to watch it. All right, you saw some flinching there, but let's watch it again. All right, again, Julian Hill is your guy on the end here, right? As we watch that in slow motion, I hope this is coming through so you can see it, right? Who's flinching here, right? One, I don't know if that's, looks like probably Tanner Connor on the outside there, right? He is definitely offsides. But if you watch to the inside here, right, it's actually the guard that's flinching on that side. Julian Hill doesn't move at all. So, this is a false start penalty, and Julian Hill didn't even move. And then, like I said, we're going to look at all of them. Julian Hill coming in motion here. This is the last one, and this is going to be a false start penalty. And, no excuse, right? This is first quarter, 10:29 to go in the quarter. You got a 1st and 5 here, and you just have a little bit of a flinch there, but that is a legitimate penalty call and one that you can't have. This late in the season, right? You've seen defenders walking up and trying to bait you into this offsides all season, and you fall for it, and you end up back at 1st and 10 again. All right, so as you can see with those penalties, like I said from the top, some of them, were on Julian Hill. He deserved them. There was a couple of them that could have gone either way, and there was a couple of them that shouldn't have been on him at all. But you can make your own judgments based on these penalties. I just wanted to provide the opportunity in my analysis on them for you to go through and to see these penalties and to make your own determination. Right? Is this a massive issue that should be preventing Julian Hill from stepping into that Y tight end #1 role again in 2025? Or are these the type of things that, can be fixed, can be improved, and continue to, grow a player that I feel has a really nice upside in this offense? As always, appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment below, and we'll talk again soon.